Hello, so this is going to be a review or summary of Act 3 of Romeo and Juliet. So, in the first scene of Act 3, we have Benvolio and Mercutio walking together. And Benvolio is kind of trying to convince Mercutio that they should go home. He's saying, hey, look, it's really sunny out, it's really hot out, there's Capulets out and about everywhere, and people just love to fight when they're hot and sweaty and irritable. So we should go home. And Mercutio then starts joking back with him, trying to say, like, which one of us is even more likely to get into a fight? And they have this, like, casual little banter. And that is when they run into Tybalt. And Tybalt, for context, does not like Romeo ever since he saw Romeo at the Capulet feast in Act 1. And Mercutio, who is technically neither a Capulet or a Montague, is very good friends with Romeo, and he knows Tybalt wants to fight him. So, of course, they both don't like each other, and they want to fight. And Benvolio, of course, is like, no, guys, don't do that. Please don't fight. And that is when Romeo shows up. And Romeo is like, guys, can't we, be peaceful? And the problem here is that Romeo's a little unclear. He starts telling Tybalt, we're not technically enemies anymore, but Tybalt doesn't understand what he's saying because Tybalt doesn't know that Romeo has just married his cousin, Juliet. So Tybalt's like, what are you talking about? And of course he gets madder and Mercutio gets madder, and then finally they just start to fight. And this is when Tybalt strikes Mercutio and he gets a really bad wound, and then he runs off. So at this point, Mercutio has been struck. Benvolio's like, oh my god, we got to get you some help. So Benvolio takes him inside, and Romeo's kind of just outside, and he's like, oh my gosh, what has happened? And that's when Benvolio comes back out and he goes, Mercutio just died. And also, as Mercutio was dying, he just kept yelling out things like plague on both your houses. Essentially, Mercutio was a little mad that he, got stabbed by Tybalt, and he was saying, you guys having all this beef with each other over this stupid house rivalry is the reason that I'm dead right now, and I'm mad about it. Curse on both of you. So Romeo's kind of just like, oh my god, this is the worst. And that's when Tybalt shows up again. And Romeo now is like, I'm mad. You killed my friend. So they start to fight. And Romeo kills Tybalt. So, obviously Romeo's like, oh no, because Tybalt is Juliet's cousin. And Benvolio's like, Romeo, you just killed someone. You need to get out of here. So Romeo runs away. This is when the prince shows up. And the prince is like to Benvolio, what happened? Give me the scoop. So Benvolio tells him, and he tells him the truth. He says, me and Mercutio were walking. Tybalt walked up, picked a fight with us because, he was mad about Romeo. And then Tybalt killed Mercutio, and then Romeo killed Tybalt for killing Mercutio. And the prince is kind of like, what? So the prince is like, okay, here's the thing. Normally when someone kills someone, I would say they should be executed. But since Romeo killed Tybalt because Tybalt killed his friend, he's like, I have a little more sympathy. So all I'm going to do right now is banish Romeo. So Romeo is no longer allowed to be in Verona. And if we see him, then we're going to kill him. So now we're in scene 2. Juliet is chilling. She's waiting to get word from the nurse about when she gets to see Romeo. At this point, they've been married, but she hasn't seen him since the ceremony. So the nurse comes in, and Juliet notices the nurse seems sad. So she's like, hey, nurse, what's wrong? And the nurse just starts going, he's dead, he's dead. Juliet misunderstands, and she thinks the nurse is saying Romeo is dead. So obviously, she becomes very upset. And then the nurse is like, no, it's not Romeo, it's Tybalt. And she tells Juliet everything that happened. And Juliet becomes very conflicted because she's like, Tybalt's my cousin, and Romeo killed him. Romeo killed my cousin, but also Tybalt was going to kill Romeo, and Romeo is my husband. And then the nurse is like, oh, Romeo's also banished. And so then Juliet obviously becomes devastated. So then the nurse is like, I know what I'm going to do. I know where Romeo is. I'm going to go find him. I'm going to get him to come to see you. So she leaves. Scene 3. Now we are at Friar Lawrence's place. So Friar Lawrence is hiding Romeo, and Romeo is essentially distraught at this point. Romeo is just like, I've been banished, and he's going on about how this is a fate worse than death, and how if the prince wanted to show pity, he would have just killed him. And he's going on and on and on. And then the nurse shows up. And the nurse and the friar are both like talking, and they're like, yeah, Romeo and Juliet are both really upset about this. So then Friar Lawrence just gets a little fed up and he gives Romeo this long lecture. They come up with a plan. He's like, you need to understand that you still have your life and that is a gift. He's like, what we're going to do is you're going to go to this town that's nearby. You're going to hole up there. We're going to try to get the families to finally find peace. We're going to get the prince to pardon you. And then you're going to be able to come back and be with Juliet. That's the plan. And Romeo's like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm happy now. And so then they come up with a plan for Romeo to see Juliet. So that's where we end with scene 3. Scene 4. Now we're with Paris, Juliet's dad, and Juliet's mom. And the three of them are talking. Obviously, Juliet's parents are both really upset right now because they have just learned about what happened to Tybalt. So they're talking to Paris, and Paris is like, you know what? Like, maybe we should still do this wedding. Everybody's upset. This could bring joy. And this time, Juliet's dad is like, you know what, Paris? You're right. Let's have a wedding. So they agree that Paris and Juliet should get married in 3 days. And Juliet's dad then turns to Juliet's mom and is like, all right, do you think you can go talk to her and get her ready and whatever? I think she's going to be very happy about this. Scene 5. So Juliet and Romeo are in Juliet's room together. Romeo has snuck in. And they've just had their wedding night, okay? So they've smooched and whatnot. And the sun is coming up, and Juliet knows that Romeo has to leave before it gets too bright out because he has to sneak out of Verona so that he's not spotted and executed, right? Because he's been banished. So the nurse knocks on Juliet's door, and she's like, hey, Juliet, you got to get Romeo out of here. Your mom is coming. So Romeo sneaks out. It's very emotional. They don't know when they're going to see each other again. In comes Juliet's mom. Juliet's mom is like, hey, you're getting married in 3 days. And Juliet, of course, is upset and shocked. And she's like, no. And she essentially says, give me some more time. That's too much time. She doesn't want to tell her mom that she's actually already married to Romeo, but she doesn't know what else to do. So she's like, just give me some more time. I'm not ready yet. And then her dad comes in. And her dad is like, what's going on here? What are you guys kind of arguing about? And Juliet's like, I'm not ready. Please give me some more time. And her dad gets really mad about this. And he's like, if you don't marry Paris in 3 days, you're done. I'm disowning you. I'm going to kick you out of the house. You're going to live on the streets. You have to marry Paris. And then he walks out. And then Juliet is like, oh my God, Mom, like, please say something. Like, what do I do? Please beg Dad to take it back. And her mom's like, I'm sorry. Like, what your dad said is what's going to happen. Marry him or you're kicked out. And then she leaves. And then Juliet's alone with the nurse. And she's like, nurse, what do I do? I don't know what to do. And the nurse, who, by the way, knows about everything, is like, Juliet, you really can't do anything. You should just marry Paris. Paris is a good guy. Forget about Romeo. And then she walks out. So obviously Juliet's feeling very alone. She's very upset. And she's kind of like, I am going to go to the friar. I'm going to see if he can make a plan. Now, we only have 3 days. I need his help. And she decides that if he can't help her, she's going to kill herself. So, essential questions to consider as you move into Act 4. What is the friar's plan, and do you think it's a good plan? So obviously the friar's going to come up with something to try and solve Romeo and Juliet's problems. Do you think it's a good plan? And then secondly, obviously this is one of Shakespeare's most famous tragedies. So do you think disaster is inevitable at this point? Why or why not?